All right, keep those question cards coming. Julia, what have we got in terms of Zoom questions coming in?
Well, and from the audience as well. There's a lot of similar questions. First of all, how did you know about these Virginia-Israel advisory boards? How did you discover them?
I think they really first came to our attention. Can everyone hear me? They came to our attention in 2016 when they were named in the bill that year, the antibds bill, which devolved into a blacklist. Basically, the bill said that the Virginia-Israel Advisory Board would keep that blacklist, would keep a blacklist of companies and people in Virginia who support BDS. And so that's how we found out about them.
It's amazing. And people there are several questions about how people can get involved with the work that you're doing in Virginia and how they can replicate it in their own states.
I would suggest going to our website and emailing us, and we will get back to you.
Okay.
Well, I'd add that you could also, in your own state, there are organizations already like that are probably concerned about Palestinian human rights, and this is really a human rights issue. And if you can just reach out to those organizations and pull them together, and whether it's Jewish Voice for Peace or American Muslims for Palestine or ADC or whatever, and it's basically a coalition effort. But do reach out to us like Jeanne suggested. We'd be happy to help.
Because I know that there are a lot of other states that have those type of economic Jewish state relation boards.
Yes.
Do you have an idea about how many?
Well, this is the only one that we know of that's actually in state government, right? In other states, they have like chambers of commerce, is my understanding. Is that right, Jeanne?
Yes.
Yeah.
So how do you keep track of all the legislation that's being floated through the Virginia legislature, or pieces of legislation that have direct impact on what your key work is? How do you keep track of all of that?
Yeah, it's not easy. We have one helpful tool in Virginia, and I'm pretty sure there should be tools like this in most states. The General Assembly has something called Lobbyist in a Box, and you can subscribe to it, and you could put in keywords that you're looking for, like Israel, Palestine, BDS, whatever, and it will alert you whenever a bill or any action of the General Assembly having those words in it is introduced. So that's a very good way. Otherwise, it would be very difficult. I mean, you have to constantly be calling or talking to people in the General Assembly. So there should be online tools in all states, I would expect by now, to do that.
Great. And this is for Jeanne. Why does Energix get federal tax credits for using toxic cadmium telluride?
I can't hear the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. So this question is for Jeanne. Why does Energix get federal tax credits for using the toxic cadmium telluride in its solar panels? Why are they continuing to get federal tax credits?
Because Grant has done an article on this, I'm going to defer this to him.
Okay, could you repeat the question?
Why does Energix get federal tax credits on these toxic solar panels?
So the solar energy tax credit by the federal government is panel neutral. So if Energix could have gotten the same tax credit for using silica solar panels, they simply chose to go again with the solar panels only 5% of the market uses. So why did they do that? I think it's, again, as Jeanne said, an indication that they're bringing their worst practices in from overseas.
And this is for Paul. So what states have been successful, like Virginia, in fighting the anti-BDS laws that are percolating?
I'm actually not sure. I know we hear about the bad news usually first. So we know like places like New York, Governor Cuomo introduced an executive order, so there's one there. We know there's one in Maryland, same thing. We know there's one in West Virginia. We know about Texas, that's notorious. So there are about 10 to 20 states which don't have such bills, which don't have such laws, which means in those 10 or 20 states, those bills were defeated, because I'm about 99% sure that these bills were introduced in every single state. So the states that don't have them, they must have been defeated, for one reason or another in their general assemblies, or in their general assemblies. The executive orders are less permanent. If the governor puts an executive order, so New York now has a new governor. So people in New York should be approaching the new governor and asking her to rescind the executive order which Governor Cuomo had done. Same in Maryland. Well, Maryland will have a new governor next year, I think, so same thing. But sorry, I don't know exact states which don't have them. I don't know, unless...
There are quite a few.
Yeah.
Do you find it's more effective to object to those kinds of laws using the First Amendment?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what it's really... that's the most significant impact on the most number of people in each state, right? It's gonna suppress free speech for every single person in that state. If HB 1161 had passed, anybody wanting to do business with the state of Virginia would have been affected. So that's one thing to point out. So it's a First Amendment, and First Amendment is like, you can't get any more basic constitutional right than that. But the other thing that's also very important that we should point out is that this is an attack on the free speech of human rights activity. This is BDS is a human rights movement, and so that's important to point out. And that's why we call ourselves the Virginia Coalition for Human Rights, because ultimately the attack on free speech is to silence us so that they can violate human rights with impunity, and we don't want them to do that. We are going to speak out, whether they like it or not, to protect human rights, and that's what it really comes down to. And it would be a mistake to not mention that, because it's not just free speech. Free speech is a very important factor, yes, but it's also a human rights issue. So I think it's both of those issues that should be brought up.
And you had mentioned in some of your remarks that anti-Semitism is illegal in Virginia. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, like any racism, I mean, anti-Semitism is racist. Is a form of racism, and the Virginia Human Rights Law, there is a Human Rights Act, which already includes that anti-Semitism is considered illegal, as it should be. Our only concern was, how is it defined? And it can't be defined in a way to suppress free speech or legitimate criticism of any issue, especially a human rights issue.
So there are also several questions about how people can join your efforts or start these kinds of advocacy groups in their own states. And both for you, Paul, and for Jeanne, how do you go about doing that? How do you replicate some of the work that you've done, especially with the textbooks and the anti-BDS legislation and other issues that you're working on, having some successes, a lot of successes actually, so mabruk. So how can other people join your effort or learn how to do that or set something up in their own states?
Yeah, I can only tell you what we did. We started with 2 people, and then there were 3, and then there were 4 and 5. And then Paul said, well, are there any educators here? And there were 2. And he said, would you mind taking on the education? And so that's how the education committee started. And honestly, I don't know how the Eject Energix committee started. We've been doing it so long.
Yeah, I forget. It was basically a VIAB project, and we were trying to you know, find out what VIAB was up to, and that was one of the things they were up to, and it clicked for human rights because not only did VIAB help this Israeli company unfairly, it kind of gave them an unfair advantage against American companies and Virginia companies, but it was also Energix was a company that was implicated in human rights violations, so it was exactly the type of thing that you know, we would want to do as supporters of boycotts, divestment, and sanctions. That's what we want to do. We don't want to give business to companies or people that commit human rights violations. So, yeah. But yeah, please look at our website to participate, especially if you live in Virginia. But even if not, contact us. We do have contacts in some other states as well. So it's vchr.org. Thank you.
That was very encouraging. It's something we can all do in our states throughout this country. Thank you so much.